That body, Republican Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, live here on Bloomberg TV and radio from Capitol Hill. Senator, it's great to see you this evening. Thank you for being with us. I think we both know that in a Democratic-controlled Senate, a continuing resolution with the SAVE Act attached is not going to pass. So what do you expect your body is going to send back to the House ultimately? A continuing resolution of what duration?
We're going to see what we come down to. It's so frustrating here, Kayleigh, because I'm on the Appropriations Committee. We've had our appropriation bills ready to go. Rather than deal with this, Chuck Schumer keeps bringing forward show votes. Today it was IVF vote we'd already taken 2 months earlier that had really not that much to do with IVF and a lot to do with cloning and gene editing that he knew would fail. These are just messaging votes to distract the public. We need to be doing our job. Back to the duration, it's hard to say what's going to come out next week, but we should have been focused on this weeks ago, and it really is legislative malpractice to find ourselves in this situation.
Legislative malpractice, you could apply to a lot of things that we've seen over the course of this Congress, Senator, but the conventional wisdom is that you're going to save the day, that the Senate will jam the House, as they say, and will avoid a shutdown. And the logic is everybody needs to get home, certainly on the House side, to do a little bit of campaigning. Do you see it that way, or are we at risk of sleepwalking into a shutdown?
Well, Joe, that is the conventional wisdom, that people need to get home, people need to campaign. This election could not be more critical right now, certainly at the presidential level, and I think the Senate, we've got a tremendous opportunity before us to change the gavel. It's going to require a lot of work and taking nothing for granted. We'd certainly like to get home and do that, but we need to get this done right.
Well, Senator, as we consider the campaign that will be happening, the campaigning that these members will be doing, and of course some of your colleagues as well, it is in the effort to get Republican control of both the House and the Senate, and presumably do a little something with tax policy when the 2017 tax cuts enacted during the first Trump administration expire. Donald Trump today suggested that a portion of what that bill was, which was capping the state and local tax deduction at $10,000, will be reversed if he becomes president again. What exactly is the policy going to be here on SALT?
Well, I haven't had an opportunity to discuss this directly with President Trump, but I think this was happening in the context of a huge rally that will be underway there in New York. I know it's going to be very popular in New York. Tax cuts in general in this environment, given the inflation that we've all experienced, are very appealing to the American public. One thing we've got to do, though, is address inflation head on. And President Trump has laid out an incredible plan to put us back into the business of producing energy like never before. That will have a direct and immediate impact on inflation, and everybody will feel that. He's also put forward proposals on taxes for tips, taxes on Social Security. All of these are aimed at getting the middle class into a far better position, and all of these come from a person that's actually quite credible, because under his watch, under his previous administration, we saw everyone prosper, particularly the blue-collar class prosper more than white collars, and every demographic group, whether they be Hispanic, black, female, you name it, everybody did better under President Trump on a real basis.
Well, you just mentioned a couple of the exemptions that he's proposing, and there seems to be a sea of them when we look at both campaigns, which is something we discussed with Maya McGuinness, Senator, of course, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, who's always asking, what about the pay-fors? Here's what she said about each of the candidates' economic promises.
This is the biggest kind of Oprah Winfrey moment of economics, of free this for you, and you get this, and you get this, and you get this. And we can just see them ratcheting it up and competing on giveaways that literally are making every economist around the country kind of blanch at how the incentives are wrong, the vision is wrong. This is just not a comprehensive economic strategy.
Senator Hagerty, I don't think either of us are getting free cars today, but I do wonder if Donald Trump needs to say more than drill, baby, drill, and that will simply grow out of it when it comes to expressing the belief here that we can keep the deficit under control. It is something that some voters are worried about, even if we don't talk about it very often on the campaign.
Joe, I think the question that President Trump needs to put to the American public is actually even simpler than that. He needs to ask them very simply and very straightforward, were you better off when I was president, or are you better off when Biden and Harris were in office? Kamala Harris has had over 3.5 years.
But if the deficit keeps ballooning, that means our kids might not be better off. Right, Senator?
No, you're absolutely right. We've got to bring the deficit under control. We need to get the economy growing again. We need to bring the regulatory regime back under control as well. All of these have dampening pressures on the economy. We're running massive deficits like we've never seen before. We've got to bring that in control. And the Biden administration just wants to continue to spend through the roof. We've got a spending problem, not so much a revenue problem as we do a spending problem, and that has to be held in check.
So that's the fiscal policy, Senator. We can't speak to a member of the Banking Committee without also asking you about monetary policy, given tomorrow's Fed decision. Do you see justification for a 50 basis point Fed cut?
You know, the market's got about 50-50 divided between whether it's going to be a 25 basis points cut or a 50 basis points cut. I've said all along it needs to be data-driven. I'm going to be very interested to see what Chairman Powell has to say as he makes his announcement tomorrow. One thing I'm also very interested to hear him talk about is the size of the Fed's balance sheet. We've not heard enough about that, but a $7 trillion balance sheet is inherently stimulative as well. That cuts against the rate increases that have been put in place. I know this is beyond the chairman's control, but also Treasury that continues to shorten the maturities of its bond issuances. You know, we need to talk about all of this in the context of the true desire to get the Fed's, the Fed's focus, which is bringing inflation down below its 2% target, to get that into the sights. So there's going to be a lot to listen for tomorrow with the chairman. Hard to say, but the market certainly seems to be in between a 25 or a 50 basis point cut.
Need to ask you, Senator, as well from your perch on the Foreign Relations Committee about what happened today in Lebanon. I'd love to know what you're hearing, if anything. The Department of State spokesman Matthew Miller had this to say about the possibility of escalation following this pager incident that injured thousands of people in Lebanon. Here's what he said.
Since October 7th, we have seen any number of incidents that have led to the heightened risk of escalation. We are always concerned about escalation. We are always concerned about any type of event that may cause further escalation. And it remains our message to both Israel and to other parties that they need to do everything they can to try and reach a diplomatic resolution.
Senator, I didn't allow too much time for us. We only have about a minute left, but I wonder if you believe this is something that Israel was responsible for. What will be the retaliation?
Well, it certainly amazes me that our State Department spokesman will only name Israel and says other parties. They won't talk about the fact that Iran is behind all of this. He didn't mention Hezbollah that's basically displaced 50,000 Israelis right now in northern Israel. This is in retaliation for actions that have been taken by Hezbollah, if indeed it's Israel that's behind it. And I think what it does demonstrate is the resourcefulness of whoever put this in place, because they've been able to get into the supply chain and get directly into the minds, I think, of the people that are there. This should have an incredible deterrent effect if indeed Israel is behind it.
Are you going to be the Secretary of State or Secretary of Treasury if Donald Trump is president again?
Joe, the most important thing right now is to win the election in November and not create any sort of speculative sideshows on the side. So you won't get me engaging in who might be where after November. You've got me focused right now on what we've got to do here in the Senate and what we need to do to win the White House and the House. Thanks.
You know, I had to try, Senator. We don't have Bill Hagerty here every day. The Republican Senator of Tennessee. It's good to see you, sir.
Kayleigh.
Thanks for being with us on Bloomberg.